Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Greater Manchester Stories. This episode's amazing guest is Veronica. She's the founder and lead of a project called Project Peel. Now, what is Project Peel? Rather than me tell you, let the lady herself tell you. So, welcome to the show, Veronica.
Hello, hi Nick. Thanks for having me along. I think I've been planning to do this for a little while, so it's great to actually finally be here. My name's Veronica, and Project Peel is a project that I've set up basically to bring about change for women who are experiencing really bad abuse from Greater Manchester Police and other police forces around the UK. And it's focusing on the lack of data that we have at the moment to the extent of the problem. But also, we just literally have a lot of women who are being targeted and harassed, and no one is helping us. So I thought, well, what's the best thing to do is actually try to change something. So I started Project Peel.
Fantastic. For many of the audience know that I was based in police stations for many years. I've trained police officers. I was never a police officer myself. I was a senior council manager looking at reducing crime. So I was based in many police stations. And up to a couple of years ago, I I probably wouldn't have believed you. I would have said these stories of exaggeration. Some of these women are obviously mentally ill. Some of them would be looking for a payout. Some of them are just attention seekers. My eyes have been opened over the last four. I mean, let's be honest. What the police did over COVID opened my eyes. I never thought any of that would have been allowed in this country. And then I've spoken to many of the women you're working with and heard the stories. And it's not just the stories. It's when they get into, and I can't get the evidence, or the evidence has gone missing, and it's like this is just so. So that's my experience. So my eyes have been opened now that GMP and many police forces now do have a problem of competency, do have a problem with corruption, do have a problem with their recruitment process, that they're recruiting the wrong type of people for many reasons. Um, could you give us some examples of Greater Manchester Police and why you think they're failing and what is the real crux of this issue?
I think to come straight in with the real crux, it is institutional misogyny. And I think the world that women live in and the world that men live in, we all live in the same world, but the experiences we all have on a day-to-day basis can differ massively. And I think we would be on different pages on a lot of things in that regard. But with the police, it is just basically good old-fashioned institutional misogyny. And women are treated like children. Women are treated like cabbages without a brain between their ears. We are spoken to in a way by the police that is just absolutely appalling. And they just seem to have this issue where they struggle. You talk about competency. The police do seem to, and this is across all kind of forces in the UK, they seem to struggle with the notion of who is the perpetrator in a crime situation, who is the victim in a crime situation. And that's it's kind of a fundamental basic. If women are reporting crimes to the police, particularly crimes of violence, rape, domestic abuse, assault, harassment, surely you can figure out the basic of who is the perpetrator of the crime in this situation, who is the victim of the crime in this situation. And they seem to have an issue with recording the crimes that women report, particularly if they're related to any form of male violence. But they also seem to have this issue about not even want to investigating those crimes. And there's a process and a pattern which I've mapped out through Project Peel, and that is you start out as a victim of crime and you can quite easily and quite rapidly become a wrongly crimed individual yourself. And then you're left fighting for years and years, that kind of situation that you find yourself in. And the examples, I mean, it belonged to an event I ran back in April time, 27th of April. And I think for the individuals who sat in the panel, it was a hustings event for the mayoral candidates. And the stories that came out in that room, I could see, particularly there was a few candidates who maybe should have been a bit more aware, particularly one individual who works as a magistrate at the moment. And it's
Don't forget, I was actually at the hustings. I was on the panel because I was standing for mayor.
But I think where you on the ground kind of lived experience, because you have been in those police stations, you are speaking to victims. And I know quite a few women who came along to that event that day have already been interviewed by you through your podcast. But it was the stories we have a woman who has reported drug rape to Greater Manchester Police. They have done nothing about that. They've referred to the perpetrator as a nice man, so he appears to be too nice to be a perpetrator of that crime. And then at some point, they walk up to her house and arrest her. And that's because she's just become too vocal and too public in her complaints against Greater Manchester Police. We have another woman, and her story is long running in terms of being a victim of crime. She is a victim of domestic abuse. She's reported domestic abuse to Greater Manchester Police. They've mishandled it massively. And to kind of cover the cracks of how they've handled that, they've decided to record false records against that woman. And they put those in the file to CPS to say that she actually suffers from mutism and she can't actually speak for herself. And it's like, this woman is a fantastically intelligent, articulate woman, but they've decided to tell CPS that she's mute just to cover the cracks so they won't kind of question her too much.
That actual woman is on a podcast with me, and she can talk very well. Yeah.
She knows how to talk. She's amazing. We also have, on the more kind of absolutely profound level of this scale, two women in that room who have lost, one woman has lost her daughter. That was in another police force area, and her daughter was leaving a violent partner. He was domestically abusive, highly violent individual. He had left her with multiple injuries on occasions. She's leaving him, but she hasn't told him. He finds out just by chance. And not only is she leaving him, she has met another man. She is now having a relationship with that other man. 9 hours later, that girl, who was only 25, is found dead in a field. There's men around her in that field area. The police arrive. They don't question anyone at the site of where she's found, and they just file off her death as a suicide. All signs are pointing to the fact that she has been killed by this partner she's left, and they've just filed it off as a suicide. In that room also, we had the aunt of Teresa McMahon, and Lorna has battled and battled to have Teresa's death properly investigated. And basically what came out of that session, and what I'm finding through the work of Project Peel, is that basically the police have no respect for women and girls in their lifetime, in the careers that are the crimes that they report, but they also have no respect for them when they are actually dead either. So we don't get justice or proper treatment in life, and we certainly don't get justice and proper treatment in death. And it's all prevailing throughout all police forces, and it's happening in plain sight of people who should be challenging this.
Can I push back on one point?
Yeah.
Why do you think this is institutional misogyny rather than just institutional incompetence? Because I've spoken to many men who will tell you they get such a poor service in Greater Manchester Police. They report crimes and then they become then the offenders. Their deaths, and I spoke to a lady, I didn't interview, but I spoke to a lady in London, her son was killed. She can't get an investigation into that. Why do you think it's misogyny as opposed to it's just pure incompetence in all our public services? But the police are a vital public service, and their incompetence is life and death for people.
I mean, this is a good point, and I think this is where we'll probably differ in a lot of things in my kind of perspective and lived experience as a woman, and your perspective, lived experience as a man. But I do accept that this problem is affecting men, it is affecting women, it's affecting girls, it's affecting boys, it's affecting everyone. But the reality is, an organization and an institution, the culture carriers and the people who set the culture of that organization are the senior leadership. If you look at the senior leadership of Greater Manchester Police, you have a panel of almost exclusively men, middle-aged men, and they view the world from their perspective. The culture in that organization will filter down from them. And I think a lot of the challenges everyone is facing is coming from that senior leadership being entirely incompetent, asleep on the job, and nobody holding them to account. With the misogyny element, women are very, what I would say, soft targets. And I think, women can be violent, women can be angry, women can be abusive, but women are typically not going to challenge the police in the way that men do. They physically can't challenge the police in the way that men do, but also we're framed somehow as being weak, we're framed as being disempowered, we are framed as being children in many ways. You know, the language that's used in terms of victims of crime who are female is painted in a very different way. Men who are victims of abuse, or particularly domestic abuse, or any crimes of rape, or, you know, in their adult life, they're framed in a very different way that women are framed. And women are framed as either being blamed for that situation, or they are too disempowered to protect themselves in those situations as well. And I think the language of misogyny that prevails in kind of talking about female victims of crime influences how female victims of crime are treated by the police also. We have a situation where the police are also majority male as well, and it breeds a culture within policing where it's very much, it is changing, there is a shift, but you have a male dominated culture also. And we get that this week from the stories that were coming out about Louise on Channel 4 News, about what happened to her at the Bolton station. And if it just seems to be a culture where men can do whatever they want to do, and they do in the kind of the knowledge and expectation that nobody's going to challenge that behavior either. I don't know if I've quite answered that question for you, but ask any woman who has engaged with the police and has reported crimes to the police, particularly any violence by men. They just get this distinct feeling that being a woman and reporting a crime of violence by a man is going to lead to a situation where you're not treated equally, or basically ethically or properly.
So your project, Project Peel, what is the ultimate aim in Project Peel? What are you hoping to achieve?
It's a change focused endeavor, and my background is working in research management, project management. I've started out my career working with small businesses, entrepreneurs. So it's very much about making change happen, facilitating situations where change can happen. It's looking at problems, particularly kind of what people term wicked problems, very, very complex problems that need solutions. And the solution may not be a simple solution. It needs to be unpicked, and it's like a Gordian knot of kind of complexity. I want to see change, and I want to see people engage into the change. Nobody is coming to save us. And I mean, my reasoning for starting this was I really started to look at this last summertime as a victim of crime badly failed by the police. I reported a crime or a series of crimes to another police force when I was living in Nottingham. And suddenly I discovered what happens when women report crimes to the police. Nothing basically happens. And worse than nothing, they started to target me, they started to harass me, they started to record false data against my name. And I ended up in this kind of endless battle against the police. And it kind of came to a pinnacle last summertime when I took the police, Greater Manchester Police, into court. And they committed perjury. That's a strong allegation to make, but they committed perjury in that court. They hired a barrister to basically frame me as some sort of deviant character. I mean, this was about data and data breaching and data recording. There was no need for that. But rather than just sort it locally, they just put me through this horrendous process that absolutely broke me. And I thought, well, there needs to be change here. This can't keep happening. I started to speak to other women this is happening to. And I realized it's just endemic. They have this endemic culture of wasting so much public money, defending the indefensible, dragging absolute nonsense into court that just shouldn't happen. And what I've learned through this process as well is no one was coming to save me. No one was going to do anything to help me. If I didn't help myself, it wasn't going to happen. And I started to apply my background and my skills into looking at this problem. I started to have conversations with organizations out there that are supposed to support women in these situations. I kind of gained some understanding and insight into where the problem is, where the failings are, why women are repeatedly finding themselves challenging police in courts and through these convoluted processes that lead nowhere. And ultimately, what I'm trying to do is make change happen, and make change happen by getting individuals who are victims of police failings to actually engage into this process as well. We need to have a voice. We're silent and we're silent. So we need to have a voice, but we also need to have engagement into the processes of change as well. So it's this notion of, you know, from my research background, you don't just go out and research things in a vacuum or in a void. You need to talk to the people who are the subjects of that research. You need to identify a problem that needs to be researched, and in the process of that kind of defining your research problem, you need to engage everyone into that process so that everyone has a voice and a part in that process. And that's what I'm trying to facilitate as well. I want all the women in Greater Manchester and beyond to have a voice in the processes of changing this police force. We can't just sit here like we're sitting ducks at the moment, but we also can't just sit here being spoken to like we're, it's the cat analogy. We have voices, we have lived experience that should be put into the processes of changing this police force's practices. And that's what I want to facilitate through Project Peel.
No, fantastic. If anyone's listening to this or watching this and they need help, advice, or speak to somebody, can they reach out to you and Project Peel?
They can do, yeah. I mean, I'm pretty much a one woman show at the moment with a small growing number of women around me. So it's become very much collective as an endeavor. But what we are finding is that we're all bouncing off the same, problems. We're all hitting the same walls. We're finding ourselves in the same blind alleyways. And my biggest wish list at the moment is to get the research and get the data gathered. So I want women to tell me their stories. I want them to share their experiences with me so that we can gather these case studies. There's a case study template within my Project Peel Twitter bio. And ultimately, what I want to do is go to funders and say, fund this research. We need the data, we need the research, we need to find out the depth and breadth of this problem. And only when we can present those numbers and figures will the kind of change happen. People will start to take it seriously. Today, you've got obviously the Baird inquiry review is being published. That's done on 14 people. It's amazing for the people who have taken part in that inquiry to have their voices heard, but 14 people is not going to reflect the entire Greater Manchester population in terms of their experience of police. It needs to be a big data exercise, and I want that to happen, and I need people to kind of help me make that happen.
No, absolutely. We need to be evidence led, and it doesn't matter if the evidence isn't what we thought the evidence was. We need to find the evidence, the facts, the stats, and then we can make change on that. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I'll put all your details, your Twitter and all that in the description of this video. And once you've had time to read, I'm going to read the bad report as well. In a week or two, once we process it, would you like to come back on and we can talk about that report, which has been long overdue?
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's great. Thank you, Veronica, and I'll speak to you again soon.
Okay,
Thank you.
brilliant. Thank you.
Did you enjoy that video? I think you did. Come on now, hit that bell, subscribe, comment. Let's build this channel. I need more followers, I need more subscribers. Be part of the journey. See you soon.